Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gut Wrench podcast. This is episode 1, and I'm going to try to work with an hour's worth of content of nothing but me, the person or persons listening to this recording, about professional wrestling. You see, I started a journey back so many years ago. It was March of, give me 1 second and I'll find it. I should have already had it pre-prepared. Now that I'm thinking about it, but we have so many things to talk about, so many things to discuss, and this is only the beginning of our journey. This is only the beginning, and yes, I am saying all of this to fill time so that I can search my phone and find where my first video came from. It was called WWE's Biggest Problem. It was 4 years ago, and it got 1 dislike. It was March 8th, 2017. This recording is going up on October 2nd, 2021. So, I'm going to I just hit my mic. I'm going to fill out an hour's worth of content sitting here talking about professional wrestling. Because I have a passion for professional wrestling. And that's exactly probably the first thing that I said whenever I decided to make the video that I was just discussing called WWE's Biggest Problem. Now, at the time, WWE had a wrestler named Kevin Owens. And they still, to this day, at the time of this recording, have said wrestler. At the time, as well as right now, I don't like Owens. I never have liked him since he's been Kevin Steen. I didn't want to have to talk about this on episode 1 of the podcast that I am doing now. However, I have no one to interview. I hate saying the word I all the time because I want to know what the viewers, what the listeners, what the people have to say. I don't want to sit here and just ramble on about myself because I know, there I said it again, I, it's all about me. But this is, in retrospect, it is kind of all about me if you think about it, because this is my platform. And if this is my platform, then I guess I'm coming off a little bit like someone who's egotistical. And to all of you, it might sound like I'm some egotistical jerk, and I want to get this out of the way the first 5 minutes of this podcast. To be something like this, because I'm not. Never did I say that I was better than Kevin Owens. Never did I say that Kevin Owens was, even though I called him mediocre, I wasn't comparing himself to me. I was comparing him to the many other wrestlers and superstars who have come and gone over the years, which is something that we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the evolution of professional wrestling. In a whole, we're going to talk about professional wrestling and what makes it special, what makes it grandiose, and why would people tune in to a TV show every week, or buy their merchandise, or for that matter, have a podcast to sit and talk about it. Even though I'm not talking to anyone, I am basically talking to myself. I am basically asking myself questions that will probably never get answers to. I will never get answers. This past week, since we're talking about professional wrestling, I don't know if it picked up on my mic or not. This past week was the Extreme Rules pay-per-view. The Extreme Rules pay-per-view in which, and you can hear my cats because I'm in my house. I really didn't want them to meow because I didn't want it to be picked up on the microphone. However, this past week was the Extreme Rules pay-per-view, and I did a video on it where I talked about the fact that it's called Extreme Rules. That's the name of the pay-per-view. But the only thing was there was only one Extreme Rules match. And I feel as though that upset a lot of people. Because in the comments of the YouTube live stream of the pre-show, they kept commenting regular rules. And you can't see it, but I'm using my hands as quote, air quotes. Regular rules. All because the fact was that their pay-per-view didn't have enough Extreme Rules matches that they were... I mean, you don't name a pay-per-view. It's kind of like if I had a pawn shop and I called it 24/7 Pawn, but I was only open, let's say, 3 days out of the week. Then it's not really 24/7 Pawn, because I'm only pawning, or I'm only open for business, for pawn shop business, 3 days out of the 7 weeks. 7-day weeks. But anyway, it just didn't make any sense, you know? And a lot of people got upset about that. So, where am I going with this? Is that it's hard to please people. It's hard to bring them to a ground level and then say, hey, here's our product. Do you like it? Do you not? Because there is no in between. I found, because that's what we're talking about, that the main event was really good. Except for the fact that they did not allow, for some reason, Finn Balor didn't win. You know, I was kind of upset about that. More than kind of upset. I did a video about it. About Finn Balor not winning. Because you see, and now that I'm on a bigger platform in which that I'm going to use an entire hour to talk about it, provided that my equipment doesn't stop working, regardless of my cats meowing into my microphone. You know, those are subtle things that I really don't, because I'm not in an office. I'm working from home. Regardless, what I mean to say is that I felt as though that there were a lot of things that went horribly, horribly wrong. For a second there, I thought something else went horribly, horribly wrong. As I just commented on my equipment not working, as long as my equipment starts working correctly, I thought that my screen went dark, because it did for a second, but then I pressed the space bar. I don't know if you heard me or not, but pressing the space bar brought it back. So what I'm getting at is that there was a major opportunity missed here, and they should have, Finn Balor should have won. And if he would have won, it would have brought forth so many great things. Matter of fact, now that I think about it, watching the highlights rather from Monday night, I should be pretty pissed off about it. I shouldn't have ever made that video. I should have waited for Monday and then made more, because I would have had so much more to talk about. But now that I have a larger platform to talk about it, that's what I'm going to do. You see, until my voice goes out, we're going to talk about professional wrestling. So Brock Lesnar is going to face off against Roman Reigns. And my voice just got a lot louder because I'm emphasizing something here. Brock Lesnar, once again in the WWE, is overpaid. And he doesn't work hard enough. But yet WWE finds it funny. They find it hilarious to keep doing the things that they're doing, and they wonder why their company is going down the toilet, so to speak. I was going to say something else, but just episode 1. We'll get to that shortly. Very shortly. But what I mean to say is that Brock Lesnar will face off against Roman Reigns. And it's nothing to look at and say, oh my God, that's going to be a great wrestling match. No. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem. And that problem isn't Kevin Owens this time. The beginning of this recording, I talked about how I can't stand Kevin Owens. And as much as it pains me to say this, Kevin Owens works harder than Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar is nothing more than a part-time piece of crap, because he only shows up for 1 to 4 paychecks a year. And he gets paid more than those who work all year. Like, WWE wonders why their fans are turning to AEW. Your answer is very, very clear. Your answer is staring you right in the face, but you're not willing to actually, for some reason, whatever reason that it is, you're not actually willing to change. you're a wrestling company that has changed so much over the times, but you're not willing to start changing again because you feel like, why do you keep yourself in a rut? That's what I want to ask them. Like I said at the beginning of this recording, that we're going to ask some questions. AEW last week had a match where Bryan Danielson, the quote American Dragon, and don't worry, we'll get to that in just a moment as well. His stage name, his ring name rather, is the American Dragon. And okay, so in 2004, 2005 year, maybe, you had this Disney Channel called Jake Long, the American Dragon. I'm not sure what Bryan's going for. Bryanson, rather. But it's not funny. Like, if he calls himself the American Dragon because he's trying to be funny or he's trying to be entertaining, it's not working once again. And the reason that it's not working, not to jump off the whole Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns trope, but I mean, there's really not much to talk about there. I have a feeling that since Brock came back, he came back to take Roman's title, and had that been the case, that's going to flush all of Roman's hard work down the toilet. To have a part-time son of a bitch take his championship, and then just basically do nothing with said championship except defend it maybe twice a year. Twice a year you might see Brock Lesnar show up, and the other 10 months out of the year he's sitting at home eating cheeseburgers, working out and practicing his UFC that he trained for. The point, of course, that I'm making is that those who work harder deserve to reap those benefits for working harder. Not those who sit on their ass and then eventually call and say, hey, I'm running low on money. Can I show up? And will you guys pay me a butt ton of money to just show up and then promote a fight between me and someone else who I don't deserve? Honestly, this is Brock Lesnar on the telephone, by the way. He's like, I don't deserve, honestly, but, you know, I mean, just give me a championship shot, you know, we just call it even. I have a feeling that over there in WWE that Vince McMahon is afraid to fire Brock Lesnar. Because I don't know what he would be afraid of. Brock would probably go back to football, or for that matter, he might even go back to whatever it is that UFC, whatever it is that Brock Lesnar wants to do. I feel as though that he should let Brock Lesnar do what Brock Lesnar wants to do and not call him anymore. He's wasting money. He's wasting people's time because, quite frankly, I'm surprised that they haven't started chanting boring at the lazy booking that we're seeing for this match. Because it's probably just going to be a one-on-one match. It's not going to be anything extreme like a tables match or I wouldn't call a tables match extreme, but it's... I mean, I've seen extreme tables matches, you know, But that's just an example. We won't see any type of special stipulation match that's going to really put a wrench in anyone's plans. It's just going to be a simple one-on-one match between Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns, and I guess Paul Heyman's going to have to make a decision. That's where the obvious choice lies. But like I said, we'll get to that, I'm sure. Jake Long, the American Dragon, was a Disney television show that ran on Disney, obviously, and this video is not sponsored by Disney, nor WWE, nor AEW, but I'm allowed to talk about this. Copyright rules. So, in case you don't know, and I know that I'm just jumping all over the place at this point. Like I said, I've got no one to talk to. It's lonely. It's boring. Yeah, I wouldn't say that it's boring. I mean, I'm having fun. Those of you listening to me, I'm ADHD. This is episode 1. I'm ADHD, just so you know. So, the thing that you need to know is that there was a television show, I guess you could call it that. It was an animated television show, and it was called Jake Long, the American Dragon. And it was about a Chinese kid who came over from America, or maybe he was Korean, I don't know, some sort of Asian boy who came over from whatever Asian country that he's from. I didn't really pay that much attention to it whenever it was on TV. But nonetheless, he shows up and he's some sort of superhero because he can fly and turn into a dragon. What? Yes, he can turn into a dragon. He can breathe fire. I guess he's got scales. I don't know. I don't even know where he got his powers from. But the point, of course, being is that whenever Bryan Danielson was over in Ring of Honor, he called himself that. He called himself the American Dragon, and everyone went with it. And that's what they would call him during his matches with people like probably CM Punk, during his matches with people like Samoa Joe, which, to be honest, are much better talents and much better performers than Bryan can ever hope to be. Yes, that is right. I am not a Bryan Danielson fan. For those of you wondering, I cannot stand the kid. I know at this point, like I said before, in the beginning of the, I want to say video, but in the beginning of this recording, I talked about how I sound like a pompous ass, how I sound like, some jerk on the internet who's looking for his 15 minutes of fame, and that's not the case at all. I can assure you, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, we have problems, and we can all talk about those problems in a platform that allows us to express our emotions, such as this one. This, ladies and gentlemen, I'm starting to lose my voice. I should have brought some water. This, ladies and gentlemen, brings me to my next observation, my next point. That AEW is starting to gain a lot of fire. And they've been doing that for quite some time, and very rarely do they make a mistake. Very rarely do they make a mistake. I've seen stuff on AEW that I didn't think that I would see anywhere else. A great matchup and I mean a memorable matchup. Usually whenever I watch professional wrestling, I end up going to sleep, and the next day my friends will ask me, "Hey, did you watch the match last night?" And then I'll be like, yeah, I think I did. Yeah, and then I'll have to recollect what it was that I watched on TV last night, because I can remember an infomercial more than I can remember a wrestling match. And it's not my memory, ladies and gentlemen. It's the fact that most of these wrestling matches are copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste type of wrestling matches. None of them stand out. None of them bring any sort of clarity, any sort of color, any sort of nothing to remember, nothing to sit down and say, hey, oh my God, I don't know what the hell I just watched, but I love every minute of it. The clarity between wrestling matches is something to behold when you can hold it in your hands, or for that matter, years down the line, remember, hey, I remember that match. That was a damn good match, or a damn memorable match. For instance, most people talk about their WrestleMania moment and how it defined them. But these matches usually, if they're going to take place within a pay-per-view, you're going to have to pay a buttload of money in order to see that pay-per-view. And that's all that you'll be able to do. I talked about this before on my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel where I talk about professional wrestling, spirituality, and I work out a little bit. And we also discuss creepypastas. But in the YouTube channel, I talked about the wrestling main events that you remember. And one of them is that I remember is from AEW. AEW. All Elite Wrestling. And I'm very sorry if my voice is getting too loud. I feel as though that I'm about to lose it because I am a fool, and I did not bring a glass of water, anything like that. So for the next 30 minutes, I'm going to be doing this without a glass of water, because leaving right now would seem... It would seem like just a moment of silence, And I don't think that I can take this. The glass of water, by the way, is outside on my front porch. Aside from my ADHD, me continuously changing the subject, I always get around to the point. And the point, of course, is that wrestling main events that you remember. I remember the last WCW Nitro, for instance, where Sting faced off against Ric Flair. And at the time, as well as throughout their career, they were somewhat budding rivals, butting heads at almost every turn. Ric Flair was especially a rival to a certain Roddy Piper, whose book I am reading right now. I've also read the Shawn Michaels book, and it discusses his traumas in life, his past traumas, the fact that he's underwent drug recovery, and the name of the book is called Wrestling with Life. and it's beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful books that you'll ever read in your entire life. If you have ever stopped and read a book, most of us maybe don't have the time, so we like to listen to podcasts, i.e. what you're doing now, probably. I would like to think that I'm recording and that someone somewhere 3, 10, 12, 14, 18, 25, 50 years from now is going to be listening to this media, and it's going to get somewhere, you know? I keep getting off track. I do apologize. I don't have a prompt, for those of you wondering, in front of me telling me where to go here. The book is an amazing read. I haven't read it all. I read like the first 4, maybe 5 chapters. And then I read Chris Jericho's book. I read 32 chapters of this man's book. No, 14 chapters. I don't know how I got. I'm pretty sure the book's not 32 chapters long, and I could be wrong about that. But nonetheless, what I mean to say is that wrestling main events that you remember stick with you forever. I remember Shawn Michaels facing off against Ric Flair in Ric Flair's retirement match, WrestleMania 26. I remember everything that happened leading up to that, where Ric Flair was basically put down, or at least that's how Shawn Michaels made it sound, that he was, quote, put down. He kept saying that for the promo that they were doing. And it was something that will stick by me for the rest of my life. Professional wrestling, ladies and gentlemen, has changed my life for the better, because it's given me something to focus on. It's given me something to work for. It's given me something to wake up in the morning for, because I crave that media. I want every bit of it to embrace me, and I want to embrace it. I want to go the extra mile for professional wrestling content and for professional wrestling fans. And if anybody has any sort of sense, they will look at professional wrestling as more than just, oh, that's fake. Yep. And I'm not going to enjoy it because it's fake. You've watched a movie, haven't you? So you know that the movie is predetermined. It's got a script to it. It's not a real movie. Unless it's like reality TV. And if that's your cup of tea, then that's wonderful. That's great. I implore you to sit down, watch a wrestling match. I'm sorry, I'm starting to lose my voice. Sit down, watch a wrestling match, and you will see just how entertaining it truly is. And if I can give you the first wrestling media to watch, and you sit down with unbiased eyes, unbiased ears, and you listen and watch to the men, the women that you are watching, it almost like makes you feel like you're watching something unfold that takes so much time, so much energy, so much focus, so much that goes into it, and it makes someone happy at the end of the day. It's a hard feeling to And you wouldn't think that something like that would make someone that exhilarated, that excited, but that's why I'm here, and we're 35 minutes in to this recording. Something else that I want to discuss before the end of this episode 1 is the evolution of professional wrestling as a whole. The first time that I started doing research for professional wrestling, for that matter, I noticed that there was this character that kept being brought up. His name is Frank Gotch. And Gotch, from the research that I'd done, if he was professional wrestling champion, he would defend his title in various non-wrestling competitions. Stuff like a chicken race. So basically, in a chicken race, what happens is, for one reason or another, you have to pick a chicken and make it walk a straight line, and the first person who can teach their chicken how to walk a straight line wins. Well, Frank Gotch was very amused by chicken races, so much so that he defended his championship in 13 of them. And I thought that that was something that was very unusual. You know, like, you would figure that a chicken race would just be a race between two chickens. And if that's the case, if and only if that's the case, then how would one, like, if Frank Gotch chose the wrong chicken and his wrestling championship got taken from him, what exactly happened again? Frank Gotch lost the world title of professional wrestling, but not by wrestling anyone. You know, like, I don't know, it doesn't make sense, you know? But he's very unusual individual, and if you were to do research on Frank Gotch and professional wrestling in a whole, you would know that that's very unusual. Nonetheless, around 13 minutes ago, I was about to talk about, and I do apologize, as I stated, and this will probably be the 4th time of me stating it, maybe the 3rd time, I'm high energy ADHD. So, with that being said, around 13 minutes ago, I was about to discuss professional wrestling main events that you remember, and one of those main events doesn't involve a man. It involves 3 women. And we're going to talk about that. And also, actually, now that I think about it, it involves 5 women, because 2 of them are on AEW. But the one that I want to talk about is the one from the WrestleMania where women finally got a main event for WrestleMania. For those of you who don't realize how big of a deal that is, not only for women, but for professional wrestlers, because up until that point, all that we had were just men professional wrestlers. Male talent, if you will. That's what we call them. And That's revolutionary to finally have a woman, or rather women, as the main event of a WrestleMania pay-per-view. And WrestleMania, for those of you who don't know, is like the Super Bowl of professional wrestling, or it's supposed to be. Slammiversary could also be considered like the Super Bowl of professional wrestling, because it's been around for quite some time now too, and for that matter, it could be starting to pick up a lot of headway whenever it comes to professional wrestling events. People could start flocking to stadiums rather, once again, for their Slammiversary. Now, these three women made their names in professional wrestling. They made their names doing what it is that they love to do. Becky Lynch, Charlotte Flair, and Sasha Banks. All three of these women practically worked their asses off to get to that stage from where they're at. And for that matter, they worked their asses off to get to the main event of WrestleMania. They probably got a paycheck that was enough to feed their family for 10, I won't say 10 years, I was going to say 10 days, but I mean, that's not really a lot of money. You know, they had enough money to feed themselves for 10 days. I mean, in retrospect, it does sound like a lot of money, but I'm sure if I Googled it, it would help me a little bit more. For 10 months, let's say that. Almost a year. If not longer. If not a lot longer. Because Becky Lynch was at one time in 2016 voted the Wrestler of the Year. The Wrestler of the Year by PWI, Pro Wrestling Magazine. Pro Wrestling Illustrated, rather. PWI. And what I mean by Wrestler of the Year is the fact that she made herself number one in the company. But not just the company. Wrestler of the Year. Notice what I'm saying. I'm not saying Woman of the Year. I'm not saying Female Talent of the Year. Wrestler of the Year. What that means is she had to work so hard to get to that stage that it almost broke barriers. It transcended what today's models are, or what today's model should be. Whenever it comes down to professional wrestling, usually that's all that a woman can obtain. Women today are oppressed. I am by any means whatsoever not a feminist. I do not support feminist claims, or for that matter believe that all men should die. But it's a male-dominated sport, and that's easy to understand. What I'm getting at right now, what's the point, might be what you're asking me whenever I'm asking you about wrestling main events that you remember. The fact that she worked that hard to get to that stage, to get to that status, to get to those paychecks, to get to where she was from, or for that matter, where she came from, is beautiful. It is a beautiful representation of what any woman and or man can do in this world, but especially for a woman, because they are discredited. They are, for the most part, for instance, Taylor Swift has a song called The Man, where she talks about if she was a man, things would be so much different. And I hate to say that, but she's right. What is it with the bias in this? Most of these companies, I will never understand that. Which brings me to my next example. My next example is, of course, another female main event. But unfortunately, it's not on a big enough stage like WrestleMania. The company that I'm talking about is AEW, All Elite Wrestling. Now, All Elite Wrestling is a wrestling company in which that broadcasts over TNT on Wednesday nights and has another show, I do believe, on Fridays. I could be wrong. It could be another day of the week, but I think that it's on Fridays. And it's not on TNT like I previously said. It's on TBS. And it's called... Okay, AEW's Wednesday Night Dynamite. Two women faced off one-on-one against each other, but it was not a fair fight at all. It was not a fair fight. For many different reasons. And I'm not going to explain those reasons because spoilers. And because I'm going to talk about the match itself, and I'm not going to talk about what happened during, like, a rundown of the actual match. Rather, I'm going to, first she hit her with a clothesline, and then she ducked under. I don't have the match in front of me, and I don't have a prompt to read anything off of, so verbatim, I can't really give you a play-by-play or a color commentary of what the wrestling match was, actually. So instead, I'm going to do an overview of what I remember. And what I remember is on a t-shirt available at AEW. Once again, that's AEW.com. It might be AEWshop.com. But I'm pretty sure it's a pretty cheap t-shirt. They might even ship it for free. I'm not sure. Don't hold me to the free shipping part. But the wrestling match in question was between two women who fought to get to that point. And the t-shirt that I mentioned, Britt Baker was bleeding. For those of you who don't understand what I mean by bleeding, blood was on national television. Violence is somewhat of a deterrent for sponsors. For those of you who still aren't piecing together the puzzles, you don't understand what that means. Now, in retrospect, violence being a deterrent for sponsors, why do hockey games get so many sponsored? You know, if you look at a hockey stadium, you'll see like Snickers logos, or for that matter, car insurance like Geico. Their logo will be like right there beside of other logos, or they'll name a whole hockey stadium after, like, welcome to the Geico Arena, you know, or the Geico Stadium, Ice Skate Stadium. And hockey is fairly violent. Nonetheless, no one really gets killed, but what I mean is, these hockey players, if you've ever watched a game of hockey, if you've ever watched football, I mean, they're tackling each other. Sometimes they're saying awful, awful, mean things to each other just because someone intercepted their game-winning pass or costed them 2 points off of a kickoff. I shouldn't say kickoff, but I should say, yeah, I think it's called a kickoff. I don't know. I don't watch football. Football sucks. I hate football, to quote Seth Rollins. And the Shield, by the way, will be something that we will be discussing. And on my next episode, I will bring some water. So, anyway, these two women went bout for each other. They practically tore down the entire house because it was the best damn wrestling match of the night. And for that matter, it deserved an award. When Britt Baker faced off against Thunder Rosa, it was a wrestling match that I will never forget. Because when Britt Baker started bleeding, I started wondering if she had what it took to win. I started wondering if she was going to lose, actually. It's those feel-good moments where you feel someone else's pain. That's what brings me to professional wrestling. For that matter, it might bring some of you away. It might make you think less of me. And on my YouTube channel, I talk about a lot of professional wrestling. I talk about, where this is my platform, I guess, I'm allowed to promote my own product without getting in trouble for it. I talk about a lot of riveting, entertaining, and for that matter, just great, entertaining content. And I've recently started uploading more frequently. We're getting to the hour mark. I would like to close this podcast at around 58 minutes. So, memorable main events for professional wrestling was stuff that not only will you never be able to forget, the memories will stay with you forever. The memories will bring you closer in life, and for that matter, bring you closer for various reasons. These memories tend to stick with you, especially if you associate them with good things. And that's what I do. I associate professional wrestling with very, very good memories, with very, very good everything. There's not a one thing that I can't think of that professional wrestling doesn't offer me. Whenever I'm thinking of professional wrestling, I get a smile on my face because it fills me with joy. That's why I'm here. Because I have a because I have a passion for professional wrestling. And anything that involves professional wrestling, I'm going to love it to one extent or another. I implore you to join me. Join me in this journey, and we'll see how far we can take it. This is only episode 1. And as I said before, I wanted to talk about the evolution of professional wrestling, and for that matter, the evolution of certain characters, or therefore lack of evolution of certain characters, if said character doesn't really have any wrestling evolution to fall off of. Thank you so much for joining me. Those of you who took the time to listen to the entire hour of this podcast. I was a little bit nervous whenever I first started, but now that the hour has passed, at the end of this episode, I'm going to ask you all, there's a paypal.me link in the description of this audio recording. If you would like to donate, that would be greatly appreciated. I really hate asking for money, honestly, because I was always, growing up, I was always told not to beg, or for that matter, not to ask for help. If you can't do it yourself, then I don't know how to explain it. It's kind of like, if you can't do it yourself, then you don't deserve it. You haven't earned it. If you need help, then you shouldn't ask for it. You shouldn't. I don't know why. Thank you all for joining me. There's still one more episode of this podcast that will be uploaded sometime later this month, October 2021.